and then it fades off because it's being tossed somewhere. But it just goes to show you that, and then they stopped taking the gifting. In other words, that bond, that trust bond, was broken by doing that. Okay, and I mean that's what I feel is because we never had anything. That stump was never accessed again. And one of the lessons we learned was, don't ever try to fool the Bigfoot by hiding recorders or the cams, hunting cams you put out there and stuff like. That's not the way to do it. You're not going to get anything. You might have one in a million. You might get a picture like that. And people go about doing things like this, and it's ridiculous because everybody's trying to hunt for Bigfoot. I'm going to go ahead and get into a spiel here.
Yeah, please do. Maybe you might save me from having to do it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Everybody's trying to hunt for it, and I hate the term hunt. Everybody's looking for Bigfoot. They're trying to find Bigfoot. So what do? They jump in their car, they got their camera, they get some equipment, they head off for the hills, they go to remote areas, and they camp for one night, and then they look around, and then they get upset because they don't hear nothing, and they leave, and then they might try one other night, and they go home and says, well, can't find Bigfoot. This is like finding a needle in a haystack. That's not how you do it. Why are you going looking for it in remote areas? Just go to certain areas where there's a way to tell in the Cascades, for instance, there's a way to tell that there's activity. And we kind of determined that just by someone having a sighting, like Barb, for instance, and that's how we knew that Greenwater had one of the areas had a Bigfoot, at least one. But if there's at least one, there's a family or a whole clan. And also, the other thing you look for, and I write this. I ended up taking all this information that I learned into the first book I wrote, and one of the chapters dealt with the habituation method of establishing a relationship with the Bigfoots. And you look for certain areas. You look for stick glyphs or stick structures, like the typical X's. And you could tell that they weren't done naturally. You could find trees pushed over that are still alive that form X's. You can find a horizontal A structures that are kind of laying either mid up the air, wedged between trees, or glyphs that are set on the ground that make very highly intelligent geometric patterns. Okay. They also like there's a source of water nearby, so it's important to note that the area can't be just not that they wouldn't necessarily be there, but your best chances when there's a water source nearby, like a lake or a river, or a marshy area, for instance.
Oh, it also gives them food too, resource for food.
We have the salmon that runs. Okay, we found that we would give them we provided peanut butter for a while, and then when salmon season came along, then all of a sudden the peanut butter kind of diminished their interest in it because now they had the protein from the salmon. That was something we noticed, early on. So food source is important, and of course, probably you're not going to have Bigfoot unless you have the forest. So it's if you're out in the middle of the desert somewhere and there's no trees, lots of luck. You might find something else. Probably won't be Bigfoot.
No, you don't know when you. Yeah, you could find. Yeah, there's talk about creatures out there too, but not Bigfoot.
But I think they got a synergy with the trees. So what I'm trying to say is, in my case, it was the fact that they kind of spoon-fed their interaction with me by first hearing the howls, and then by having some interaction, because I had a young one. I was prepared. I have a cabin down there, and I just built a fire pit, and I just started a fire in it, and walked back into my RV, and just for a minute, I came out, and all of a sudden, it just caught the corner of my eye. Something just running away from my fire pit, screaming like a little, like a little, chattering like a little monkey would normally, just screaming at the top of his lungs, running towards the woods. So I guess the curiosity of the young one wanted to look at the fire and just decided to take off again. Then I seen some. Then we had an incident where behind the tavern, local tavern there, and went behind a set of buildings we have there in the dark, and heard what their imitation of the barred owl sometimes was pretty loud. Went back there, and all of a sudden that's where I learned my lesson about the flashlight, because I took one of those LED flashlights, flashed it up in the trees, and oh man, what I thought was one, there was about 5 or 6 of screaming and chattering, and I thought they were going to jump on me or something because they were up in the tree. So I had to back out of there, and then ended up that night where one ended up being up the tree, and I just asked one of the fellows, please shine your light up there, because they were chasing, and I didn't really know better at the time. That was some time ago. And then he had the flashlight up there long enough for me to see this blackish gray ball lunge from one tree horizontally 20 feet to the other tree. I mean, just lunging, kind of like, you hold the tree with your hands and then use your feet to push propel and then get to the other side. But he pulled the flashlight away after it started lunging. So, yeah, that was the first couple of experiences I had with him,
Now, did you notice what I noticed with when it came by the car, and again, it was like about 25, 30 feet away from the car, I could smell the stench. And people have told me, oh, they don't smell. Well, the one I saw, it was close by, it had like a musty urine, real
like a garbagey smell, it was very foul.
Very foul. In fact, after we drove away, we had to open the windows of the car and air it out. That's how strong it was. It was nasty.
Usually if they do that, it's because it wasn't a good encounter for you or them. They do that. And if they were trying to be your friend, they're not going to use that kind of odor on you, okay, usually. I had never had that. Never had that happen to me, ever, and all the time, except one time. And what happened was the tent that we'd set up on one of our campouts. I think what happened, one of the young ones was messing around because we were up by another part of the camp, and it was dark and where my tent was. And this young one was kind of messing around. And when I say young one, I meant the young Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, if you want to call him that. Was kind of messing around down there a little bit, and I had, the kind of tent where you have the support wire or nylon cords with the stakes, all around, and they stick out a little bit, so it's easy to trip on one. Well, what's kind of funny is so I'm heading down there, and I get down close to my tent, and I smell that odor that you're talking about. Okay. I had my flashlight with me, and I look on the side of my tent. I'm looking at one of the stakes. I'm looking at one of the cords, and the stake is in the ground. But the only problem, there's all this slack to the cord itself, and the stake is clearly not where it was originally. So I surmised what happened was the little Bigfoot or whatever must have tripped over and knocked the stake out as I was coming, and panicked, and put, in his panic probably put out that odor and just pushed the stake in and got out of there and didn't put it in the right place. Nobody else in that camp did that. I confirmed it with everyone that stake moved from the tension point where it was put to closer to the tent where it had all the slack that wasn't doing anything. So that was the only time I actually smelled it.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Like I said, it was strong enough where it, actually nauseated us. And so that between seeing that and smelling that was just enough. And that's one thing I want to tell you people. If you're out in the woods and you got a sidearm or something like that, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think a sidearm is going to do you any good at all. You're better off if you run into a Bigfoot, don't show any aggression, and I would just turn around and, pay attention as you turn around and leave their area. You don't want to, maybe cause something that you'll regret. Now, it's one thing I will tell you, Samantha. I have talked to some elders at a couple of tribes, and back a few months ago when I had Ed Romans on, and they all told me the same thing. They go back, back many generations. We're talking around 1800s and early 1900s. They would talk about like their squaws would be down, down at the river, for example, doing their laundry, doing what they normally do with their little, babies and stuff like that. And all of a sudden a Bigfoot would, like grab either the baby or grab the squaw. And then they would find the remains, maybe the next day or so. And so they, at least the Muckleshoot tribe I talked to and another tribe I talked to said that they were, at least back then, they were aggressive. Now, maybe, too, don't forget, men were invading all over the country, going west. That could have maybe been a different circumstances there, but I don't know. Maybe there's different species of them out there. Maybe there's some like, again, like bears. A perfect example, right? Bears, know where the campers are. They know where they put their food and the garbage. So they go, they kind of like use that to get their food. And they tolerate man for that reason. And maybe Bigfoot has learned the same thing, Maybe, we can, get what we need from, the humans too. But again, depending how far you go out in the woods, you could end up with a different species or just a different clan of Bigfoot. And that's where the problem could be. And what really frustrates me so much, Samantha, is there was a guy on Facebook, and I think he quit because I really got into it with him, that he was going, on trails, right from the parking lot, and hiking in maybe a mile or two, where these trails where hundreds and hundreds of people a day were walking, trying to catch a picture of a Bigfoot. And I told him, I said, you're not going to find a Bigfoot that way. It'd be really rare to be going on a trail, which all these people are walking all day on, to find a Bigfoot. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think that's going to happen.
No, I got a number of fairly clear pictures of them, and it's not because I went and chased them down or anything like that. Probably close to 100 pictures, probably. And I'm not talking about these pixelated things that, they're some of them are pretty decent. Some of them are, but I do have some great ones that have. By showing the contrast, part of the problem is some of them do have the abilities to kind of mask themselves in a dark, smoky screen. And the one I had interaction when I had one adult that interacted with me, and I knew something was up when I looked up the hill and I saw the shadows from the trees. And all of a sudden, between these two trees, it was darker than the shadows on either side, and the shadow was moving. The darkness was moving like a wavy blanket like a mirage when you see on a hot day. When you're looking at the road, it kind of like does that trick.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at it, says, that's not natural. And I'm trying to look closer because my old human eyes can only see just so far into that. And I reasoned at that point, says, well, I know who's in there. And something told me, it says, yeah, it's an adult behind there. So now this is what's important. This was a direct encounter, and he was probably about 120 feet away, okay? I stood there. I just looked at that way, and I didn't run. I waved at him, took my cell phone out, and took a picture. And then I got a little bit closer. 15 seconds later, took another picture, waved again, and just walked out slowly. Or just walked around and walked out of there. This is that little magical area that all the little people and everything that we're going to talk about a little bit shows up in. But the cell phone, of course, is not. It's an 8-megapixel camera, and I've since moved to a 24-megapixel Nikon camera.
Oh yeah.
Nikon, yeah, because you need that. But the cell phone resolution